I will talk about populist leaders and international migration today. So I think I don't need to remind everyone that there's an important rise of populism today in many countries, and there was one, and so that happened in the last 2 decades. So we have seen Trump election in the US, possible re-election this year, the Brexit, recent Dutch elections, and more generally European elections, where we see that populist parties, even if they are not necessarily part of the government, they are important enough to drive the laws in each country. And this rise in of populism generally comes with anti-immigration positions. So build the wall or stop the invasion or the great replacement theory. And so in this paper, I want to explore a bit whether having a populist leader actually affects immigration and immigration flows. And if so, what are some potential mechanisms? So first on this topic, the first question is, what is populism? It's a notion that is very hard to define because it covers a lot of aspects, so some social aspects, some economic aspects, and there are many partially overlapping definitions. So basically each paper, or almost each paper, has their own definition. And so in the recent literature review, Goriev and Papayoannou tried to extract common items from all these various definitions. And they extracted 2 common items mainly. The first one is anti-elitism, which is the idea that populists would represent the pure people against the corrupt elites. So it would be really a fight of us versus them. And the second item is anti-pluralism, so the idea that there is no middle ground. So you're either with us or against us, and there is no protection of minorities, no diversity of opinion. So those are the common items that are derived from the literature review. In this paper, I will use some data of Funke and co-authors who made a recent paper on populism and the economy. And basically, they define a person of a power party as populist if he or she divides society into 2 artificial groups, so the people versus the elites, and then claims to be the sole representative of the true people. So here we can see that the definition basically is quite close to the items that were extracted from this literature review. And importantly, this definition does not take into account the actual policies that are put in place by populists. It's mainly on their discourse, so how they define themselves rather than actual policies. So that's something to keep in mind. There is a very extensive literature on populism. So here I just cite a few articles, but there are many more. So there is a large literature first on how to define it, as I mentioned previously. There's also about why is it rising. So what are the causes of populism? So here we find some economic evidence, so economic insecurity or inequality. Globalization is also pointed out as one of the main factors, and among globalization, immigration. And then there's also a trend on the literature on what are the economic consequences of populism. So there were some papers showing that it degrades the quality of the bureaucracy in a country, and it has negative effects on inequalities or on the GDP. So that's, for example, the results of Funke and co-authors, which is the paper where that I'm quite close of. But in this paper, I want to focus on the less explored impact of populism on international migration. And the reason this question is less explored is also because it's very hard to claim causality when, about this effect of populism on international migration, because there are a number of factors that affect both the rise of populism and migration flows. So I mentioned economic insecurity or inequalities before. Those usually promote the rise of populist leaders, but there are also reasons why people would like or wouldn't like to migrate to a certain country. So it's very hard to claim causality on this question. Yet there are a few papers who try to do that using various identification strategies. So some papers use close election settings at the municipality level. For example, in Italy, there are two papers that focus on the close elections of Lega Nord mayors to see if there is an effect on internal migration. And basically, they find that having a Lega Nord mayor decreases immigration, but has no effect on internal emigration. In a very similar setting, Schmutz and Verdugo focus on trends this time, and they find that having a left-wing mayor increases the growth rate of immigration. So here, they're not specifically focusing on populism, mostly on like the effect of election or political impact on immigration. A second identification strategy is using instrumental variable, and here there is one paper by Doki and Vasilakis, which is still a working paper, where they use an instrument combining collective memory and trigger variables. Basically, the idea is that in areas such as region or countries where there is a history of populism, for example, measured by the share of votes for Nazi parties 100 years ago. So these areas are more likely to see a rise in populism again today if there are some hard economic conditions. So the trigger variable would be, for example, economic crisis. And basically, they combine these two, collective memory and economic crisis, to have some exogenous variation. And they find that an increase in populism decreases immigration, especially for high-skilled individuals, and increases emigration. So there would be like basically like a flight of high-skilled individuals. So this paper is the closest to mine in terms of question and results. So I will compare my results to theirs. So in this paper, what I do is using some variants of the synthetic control methods to explore this question and address the endogeneity issue. And I find that having a populist leader reduces the growth rate of immigration, both high-skilled and low-skilled, but has almost no effect on emigration. So that contradicts the results of Doki and Vasilakis. I find that this effect is mostly driven by a right-wing populists, because they are the one who implement more restrictive migration policies. However, there is virtually no change in the country's attractiveness when a populist leader is at power. So I will define later how I measure this attractiveness. So the data I use to explore this question was created by Funke and co-authors, and they provide a data set on who is populist and who is not, that covers 60 countries between 1900 and 2018. So they provide binary coding. So for each leader, you are either populist or not populist. And then they also indicate some additional information. So is the leader right-wing or left-wing? What is exactly the ruling period? And they also divide the sample in two, so the core sample and the extended sample. So I focus on the core sample, which is basically all the leaders for which they have enough time so they have at least 10 years after the leader comes at power. So, for example, Trump wouldn't be in the core sample because it was less than 10 years ago. Since the data on migration that I will use is available since the 1960s only, I discard all populist leaders before that. And I also exclude populist events in the same country if there is less than 10 years apart. So for example, in Italy, between 1995 and 2008, there were 3 populist leaders with populist events, since it was every time it was Berlusconi. And if I took them into account, like, it would really blur the post-treatment period for one event and the pre-treatment period for one event would really blur together. So I exclude all populist events that are too close to one another. So I end up with 12 populist events. So those can be in the same country. For example, in Argentina, there are 3 of them, but because there is enough time between each of them. Greece also has 2, and otherwise it's a single occurrence for Brazil, Ecuador, and yeah, Japan, Philippines, South Korea, Thailand, and Turkey. I also have So as I said before, the left-wing or right-wing classification that I will use to explore further the effects of populism on migration. Now about migration. So we know it's difficult to have migration migration data for a long time period. So I use imputed data sets that was built by Standard and NRI on yearly bilateral migration flows. So basically it's a Bayesian estimation using census data plus mortality and birth rate. And it gives, of course, imputed data, but that's the only way to have bilateral migration flows on a yearly basis. And I will explain why this yearly basis is important in the method section. Then I split this migration data between high-skilled and low-skilled migrants based on the skill distribution of migrants from each origin to each destination from the 1990 and 2000 censuses. So this is an important assumption because it means that I assume the skill distribution is more or less the same across years, but that's also something that is done quite frequently in the migration literature. And I use the growth rates of immigration and immigration as a dependent variable to have a comparable measure across countries. So that doesn't depend on the size of the flows, but more to have something more common. I also use some other controls that are more classical, like GDP per capita or unemployment. So this populism and migration data will be used to derive the main results of the paper, and then to explore the mechanisms. Sorry. So just to give you an idea of descriptive statistics for migration. So on average, the growth rate of immigration is about 5% per year, and similar for high-skilled and low-skilled individuals, which comes also from the fact that I have the full flow per year, and then I split it by high-skilled, low-skilled, based on a share that is more or less static. So yeah, this was about for the main results of the paper, and then for the mechanism section, I will use some data on migration policies, which come from the endemic policy database. This database covers 45 countries between 1945 and 2014, and basically gives information on new migration policies. So every year they record changes in migration policy. So they recorded information like the scale. So is it a national or multilateral policy? The magnitude, is it like minor, middle, or major? So that depends on, is it a modification of an existing law, or is it a new law? And also, does it affect all migrants or just some groups of migrants? So it gives information who is targeted. Is it all migrants or just workers or just refugees, for example? And also, some other aspects. So they split these policies by category. So just to give you a few examples, for example, in France in 2007, there was a new policy where they said companies now need to verify the work permit of foreigners before employing them. So this kind of policy already existed before. So it's just a minor change, and also because it affects only a subgroup of migrants, so only workers. And they classify it as something that is restrictive because it's harder for migrants to find a job, basically.
Yeah. We have a question in which Narcisse asks whether you distinguish between populist leaders based on their campaign discourse and populist leaders based on their implementation of restrictive immigration policies, as there might be some populist leaders that have a discourse-based campaign discourse, but once they are in power, they don't actually implement these policies.
No, so this is only based on the discourse. But then I explore like between right-wing and left-wing populist leader. I explore who implements migration policies. So that's for the mechanism section. But yeah, like the classification of who is populist and who is not basically wasn't done by me and relies only on the discourse. And yeah, so I just wanted to mention the second example of migration policy. So in Australia in 2011, there was an introduction of a language test before entry into the country, and that affects everyone and was a new law, so it's classified as a major change that restricts access. So that's for the first mechanism. For the second one, which is the country's attractiveness, we'll use the Gallup World Polls, which I think are quite renowned now in the migration literature. So those polls are yearly surveys in almost all countries. That concerns about 1,500 respondents per country and per year. Basically, they ask the questions: if you had the opportunity, would you like to move permanently to another country, or would you prefer to continue living in this one? And then if the individual says, yes, I would like to move, the follow-up question is, where would you like to move? So based on those answers, I rank the destination countries based on how many people want to go there. And I will see how this rank changes when there's populist leader power compared to when there is not. So another method that I will use, the main challenge about this question that I mentioned earlier is the endogeneity of arrival of populists at power. So there are many factors that influence both the arrival of populists at power and migration flows. So I need to find a credible counterfactual to estimate the effect of having populists at power on migration flows. And to do so, I use the generalized synthetic control method, which is based on the synthetic control method. The idea of synthetic control is that basically we make we make a weighted combination of untreated countries, so countries that never had a populist leader. And this weighted combination has to, so the trend for this combination has to fit the trend of a treated country in the 10 years before the treatment. And this trend is basically the growth rate of immigration or emigration in the 10 years before the treatment. So the idea is that if there is a good fit in the pre-treatment period, then I can assume that the synthetic control in the post-treatment period is a good counterfactual for the treated country. And then the effect of populism on migration is a difference between the synthetic control and the treated country in the post-treatment period. So this is just for the synthetic control method, which is usually used when we have only one treated unit, so one region or one country. Here, as we have seen, I have multiple treated units. So I use the generalized synthetic control method, which allows having multiple treated units. And also one interesting feature is that it gives confidence intervals by bootstrapping the estimates. So this is for the main results. I also checked those results, like their robustness, with some alternatives, some other variants of the synthetic control. The first one is basically I'm applying the simple synthetic control method to each event separately, and then making a weighted average of the results based on the goodness of fit in the pre-treatment. So the better the fit in the pre-treatment, the more weight this event will have in the weighted average. The second alternative is to use the partially pooled synthetic control. Here, the idea is to make a compromise between the fit at the event level and the fits at the aggregate level. So it goes a bit further than just making an average of each event separately. And I also use the synthetic diff in diff, which is a mix of synthetic control with diff in diff, where here the condition on the pre-treatment period is a bit relaxed. So instead of requiring a good fit between the synthetic control and the treated country, we only require that their trends are parallel. For those alternatives, I can't derive standard errors, so they are mostly here to check that the sign and the magnitude of the effects are the same. But I would have to rely on the generalized synthetic control to show whether this effect is significant. And then I also test the robustness of the results with some time placebos in T-1. and T-2. So this was to get the main results, and then to analyze the mechanisms. Regarding migration policies, I estimate a Poisson regression to count basically migration policies when there is populist at power. So here the dependent variable is the number of migration policies in country I at year T. So this can alternate between all policies or only restrictive or only permissive policies. And the interest variable is a dummy that indicates the presence of a populist leader in country I at year T. And this, again, I will alternate between all populist leader or just right wing or just left wing. So, this I can't claim causality with just this regression. It's mostly something to have an idea of a correlation between having a populist leader and implementing migration policies. To analyze the effect on attractiveness of a country, it's almost the same. The dependent variable this time is the rank of the country. So in terms of how many people want to go to this country. So the lower the rank, the better it means in terms of attractiveness. And the interest variable is the same. All right. So the main results of this paper are shown on this graph. So these graphs show the difference between the trend for the treated country and the trend for the synthetic control. So if the trend is close to zero, as is the case in the pre-treatment period, it means that there is a good fit between the treated country and the synthetic control. And then in the post-treatment, we see the effect. So here we see that having a populist leader has a negative effect on immigration flows. And that's the case when we look for all migrants or only high-skilled or only low-skilled. So we can see that after a few years, like 3 or 4 years, we almost reach. So the growth rate of immigration is almost 20 percentage points lower than in the counterfactual, which means that immigration decreases when there is populist leader at power. So here the blue area shows how long on average a populist leader is at power, which is a bit more than 5 years. Just to check, these are the results with the alternative methods, the alternative synthetic control. And so we can't have standard errors, but we can see that the direction and the size of the effect are very similar. I also check with a placebo, where I put the treatment time in T-2, and the results are basically the same, maybe slightly less significant, but very close. And most importantly, the effect between T-2 and T0 are null. So now these are the aggregate results on the 12 events. But what if we split the results by event? So we can see that here, so these graphs show the ATT per event, so on the full 10 years post-treatment, and with the orange bar being the average. And here we can see that there is quite some variation in the effect. So for some countries, some cases like Argentina, 1999, the effect is quite strong. But then in some cases, we see that there is an increase in migration flows, in immigration flows. So while it's interesting to have the aggregate effect, this also shows it's important to do more case-by-case analysis, because there might be important differences. So now what happens when
yeah. What might be driving an increase on immigration, for instance, in Ecuador in 1996? Just curiosity, why? Because it looked quite different from all the rest. Well, Greece, 1981. Just curious about this too.
I must say I didn't dig into the Ecuador history to explain this, but this is definitely a strange case. I will show also when I look at immigration results that it's clearly an outlier compared to the other countries. But yeah, for now, I don't have a good answer for you for why Ecuador and has this effect. So now what is interesting is splitting between left-wing and right-wing populist leaders. So here, this is the result for left-wing. And we can see that basically there is no effect. So the coefficient might be positive, but it's completely insignificant. So there's no effect of having a left-wing populist leader on immigration flows. However, for right-wing, the story is a bit different. We can see that the effect for all migrants is still negative. And yeah, if you take a look at the scale, so basically the size of this effect goes maybe to -15 or -20, which is very similar to the aggregate effect I had before. What is weird, however, is that I don't find this significant effect on either high skill or low skill. So yeah, for now, I don't have a good explanation for this, but I think it's also important to keep. So it's I don't think it threatens the effect on all migrants. So for now, we can see that the effect of populism on immigration flows seems to be mostly driven by right-wing populists. What about immigration now? So we have, I have this very weird results where a single point is very significant and not the rest. So I would say the effect overall is basically non-existent. This looks like a statistical artifact from the generalized synthetic control. However, we also see this huge difference on the effect by event. So Gabriel, you were asking about Ecuador 1996. Here, it's super strange to have this. So for this country, the effect on high skill is extremely low. Extremely negative. And on low skill, it's extremely positive. So yeah, as I said before, I don't have a good explanation for this, but I will have to look into this weird case. But overall, yeah, the average effect is more or less 0. So those are the main results. So a negative effect on immigration, almost no effect on immigration. What could be driving those results? So those results could come from the destination country. So that could be more policies to restrict immigration or more enforcement of existing law, but I can't have data for this for enforcement of the law. It could also come from the origin countries. So if there is a lower attractiveness, so if there is a populist leader in a destination country, maybe migrants voluntarily choose not to go there. So this table shows the results for the first mechanism part about migration policy. So here, the 3 columns are for the dependent variables, which are all migration policies, or only restrictive or only permissive ones. And then here I distinguish when I keep all populist leaders or only right wing or only left wing. So these are 9 regressions that are not made at the same time. And we can see that the only effect is when we have right-wing populist leaders, then there are also more restrictive migration policies, which will explain why we only see an effect for right-wing populist leaders. So in the dynamic policy dataset, there is all kind of all type of magnitude. So maybe we're just capturing the effect of very small fine-tuning changes in policies. But if we restrict only to major policy changes, then the same pattern appears. So
Etienne?
Yeah.
We have another question by Andres, who asked that in Argentina 1989, under the Menem government, he had a left-wing discourse and ran for a traditionally left-wing party, but then implemented right-wing policies and is classified as right-wing in the dataset. And he wonders whether the results are robust to that classification.
Sorry, to which classification?
So in your classification, Menem specified as right wing, but then his discourse was originally left wing, even if then he changed in terms of policies.
So wait a minute. If I go back, okay, so here it was classified as right, and in the actual policy it was more left wing, right? In
terms of the discourse, he was more left wing. So Andres wonders whether there's any kind of robustness of this classification, I guess, overall.
So I'm not, yes, I'm not changing the left or right classification. I'm just going with the classification of Funke and co-authors. I don't try to switch them, because basically the classification was made using, like, they did a literature review for each of those leaders to say, okay, so this is why we classify them as a left or right-wing populist leader. So I guess that there should be more details in the appendix of Funke and co-authors if you want to check. But yeah, I didn't try modifying this left to right values. So yeah, so for basically the result and the mechanism of migration policies indicates that the effects of when there is a right-wing populist leader at power seems to come from more restrictive migration policies. Now about the changes in the country's attractiveness. So this graph basically shows the evolution of the rank of a country over time. So it goes from 1 to about 200. So when you are at 1, you're the most attractive country, basically. So the US are consistently at 1. And then the colored areas indicate when there is populist leader at power, and then orange for left wing, blue for right wing. And here, first visually, it's very hard to see clear patterns. So we can see there's a lot of stability in the rank of each country. So Argentina or Greece or India, Israel, Italy. So it's very hard to derive just graphically if there is an effect on the attractiveness. And then in terms of estimation results, so here I try to estimate the effect of populism on the rank, and we can still see that there is no significant effect. So that indicates that the results seems mostly driven by the destination. So what happened at destinations about migration policies, not so much about migrants' preferences, or even though those are only capturing, I'm only capturing intentions here. Maybe if we just have intentions, people are not really looking at what happens at the destination, because it's just, in an ideal world, I would like to go there, but for now, who knows? So yeah, already at the conclusion, so that's at least we'll have time for the discussion. So in this paper, I wanted to answer the question, does having populist leader affect immigration and emigration? So on average, I find that having a populist leader reduces the immigration growth rates of high skilled and low skilled, but has almost no effect on the immigration growth rate. This results is mostly coming from right-wing populist leaders, and those are more likely to implement major restrictive migration policies. However, I don't find any clear effects on countries' attractiveness from the point of view of migrants. And it's important also to note that the size and the direction of the effects varies importantly across cases. So here I've had really an average effect, but as we have seen when I split by events, there is a lot of change, and it's important to continue studying those events on a case-by-case basis. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for the questions. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Etienne. Okay, so now we're going to have the discussion by Juno.
Okay, let me share my screen. Do you see this in the full screen mode?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Maybe I think I have about 10 minutes or more or less, so maybe I can just drop the whole questions, and you don't have to answer each of them right now, but I can definitely send you this slide afterwards. And there are some pop-up questions that I had that arose during the presentation, so maybe those are not in the slides, but maybe I can just proceed. So first of all, the quick question was about whether you are using the inflows and outflows are referring some sort of immigration and emigration as referring inflows and outflows. Did you mean the immigration is kind of inflows and emigration within outflows in the country, right?
Yeah.
Then, as you are using the bilateral movement, people might sometimes think that, oh, if we can just collapse these flows into more kind of unilateral and see what is going on with the net flows within a country, to see whether the overall migration flows is increasing or decreasing. And maybe I can go on the slide as well. There are some things to think about. First is about where is your paper located in the literature. So I think the part like these kind of questions is partly answered during your presentation, but I feel like the parts of your core explanations are quite scattered around in your draft, because I got your draft, and you could have some more room to bolster your explanation in more kind of coherent way if you just condense it. So first of all, why you are interested in the international migration now, and why you are interested in the political leaders, which have the national level impact, not local level. You could be more clear about it and why you are interested in this and what is going on with this interest in the context of the overall literature. Say, I do get that using the election of populist leaders could make you use the national level impact, which is more important in national level immigration policy. But I was wondering if you have some other kind of underlying backgrounds, or is it just because you could use national level immigration policies or something? And like I said, you could make your project distinguishable from other papers and approaches, say like Bracco et al., like Segron example, which are the ones that are also in my paper, but they are using the internal migration in more kind of local level and this municipality or something. So you could make what are the things they are focusing on, and what is you are focusing on, what is the difference between the two, and what could your interest could give into this literature. I think the Pan could be one exception, but I think she might, Pan might be interested in the inter-country transmission of knowledge through this kind of international immigration of inventors. You could give some kind of narrative in there. So that's why I'm saying that you could consolidate the literature and connect to yours, also in unit analysis as well. And another thing is why you are using the generalized syntactic control method. It is also the same in the things, but you could give more concrete reason that could make you and the readers feel that, oh yeah, synthetic control method is quite better in this context, in this niche market literature. Because you could also you did really well in literature review, but you could give others approach, and you could add what your approach can give, and what is the limitation of others' approach, and what is the strength of your approach. And you could also admit some sort of limitation of your own approach as well. But this could make your presentation as well as draft more coherent and bolstered way. And it could be great if you can make clear statement about your understanding of source of variation. You say RDD is really into internal validity, but I have a weakness in external validity. So you could address more understanding of your approach of what is the identifying variation to show about your strength as a researcher, if you are really into give some kind of good impression on your job market as well. And I think you are interested in cross-country variation, definitely. And it will be really great to show how you think you really need a synthetic control, not simple diff and diff. Say in paragraph 1 is section 2, you addressed about structural differences, but you could make more some narratives on it to explain what is going on. What did you mean to those readers without any backgrounds on this literature? And you could possibly connect more firmly your structural differences argument and having a good fit with a pre-trend from synthetic control method, because you are having good pre-trend fit with synthetic control method. You could connect this fact to say that, oh, hey, I'm really concerning about structural differences, but I'm trying my best to eliminate this kind of structural differences through this kind of evidence or something. So you could also make this kind of argument with this last bullet point, where you could address like cross-country variation would be really bigger than that of within country variation, and having good fit of pre-trend also can handle this kind of thing in terms of potential structural differences across countries as well. And yeah, this is kind of a clarifying question, but in my draft that you gave me earlier, equation 1 says that weights are W's or V's. I mean, like in XH1, I see V or W's are missing, while whereas the other X's have W's. You could go equation 1 and double check in your draft. And this is kind of a broader general comment about SEM, like for a broader audience. SEM is definitely conceptually and theoretically really attractive. I do know about it, but this could be not a perfect approach to everyone. So like maybe it would be great if you have some more compelling interpretations of estimate when you are using SEM in every single presentations as well as your draft. Say people might ask that you are comparing treated units to what? This is just synthetic, really synthetic, like just combined. So you are comparing what to what. So you could give kind of really good explanation in more kind of layman's text to broader audience, like you did in your draft, saying that, oh, this is kind of like the conceptual counterfactual, which will represent the situation without, could have, without this populist leaders. So yeah, also you could have good solid answers to potential audiences who are really familiar with international political context, such as political scientists and political economists, as you got some context related questions in our Q&As and chats. And maybe you could also think about the Duchesse-Martin and Dortfeier's 2020 paper as a robustness check that is outside of the SEM family. The robustness check you are now handling is quite more about SEM family, but people might think about what about the outside of that, such kind of set. So this could be definitely what you can think about. And about the results, I was wondering, do you have any sense about why main results are rebound to the normal level as before? Do you have any compelling evidence or explanation about it? And related to that, did immigration policies lifted or flipped after the populist leaders' terms? And I was wondering if you have any sense about the timing. When did the restriction or implementation of immigration policies happen during a term of a populist leader? Is it kind of earlier part, the middle, or long term? And I was wondering also, this kind of implementation of restrictive migration policies are easier to predict, especially by the potential migrants in your context. And as the rise of populist leaders also predictable. And like I said, it was also about the timing. Like a migration decision cannot happen like at once. Like, oh, there's populist leader. Oh, there's a restrictive policy. Okay, I'm gonna just pack up, just go. This kind of things can happen like right away. And at one point, people have some kind of lags times to think about. So I was wondering if this kind of migration policy change and migration pattern could coincide, or what kind of like patterns do you have for these kind of things? And I was wondering if you have any further supporting evidence about anti-immigration immigration policies. Say because of that, the populist leaders could induce, say, native low-skilled got better off, or something to bolster your argument or mechanism. And this is kind of tiny one. And figure 2 and 4, you could make it more even better by distinguish left right wing by colors or something to show some sort of average by left and right wings as well. And about linking to the literature, you could give more a coherent explanation in your draft by not just saying that we have different outcome from this literature, but you could give more explanation. Why did you have different estimates? What is the difference, and what do you think about it? And in immigration as well, you said there's only a single year popped up, but what do you see is what you have. So you need more explanation about why you have it and what drives it. And mechanisms, I thought you are using in equation number 3 OLS, but maybe I missed. In your draft, it says an OLS, but in your presentation, it says a Poisson. So I was wondering what is your underlying assumption about it, about the count data, because maybe the distribution of Poisson distribution is having the same mean and variation of lambda. And I was wondering how you were going to think about the count data as a zero inflation problem about it. Maybe you could think about other approaches as well at the same time. The first 2 points are just made it, and definitive with staggered adoption of reverse over treatment can be another approach about this mechanisms as well, because this restrictive immigration can be reversed afterwards. I'm a bit confused about the interpretation of your results. Say like in your paper, right wing have more restrictive migration policy, but the result have a lower growth of migration from high-skilled individuals. So I'm a bit confused about the narratives. Right wing is not pushing out and hindering low-skilled immigration. If you have a right wing and have restrictive policy, but high-skilled responds too much, not coming into, while low-skilled are not that much responding to. And on the other hand, left wing, there are also some decrease in growth of low skill, I mean high skill, I should say, whereas they are not likely to have restrictive migration policies. But statistical significance is quite limited, though. But I think you should have a clear answer to that, why you have high CIs, so that statistical significance is so limited. Is it kind of because of smaller sample size, you are pushing data too much? I think you need to handle and get these answers because you are showing graphs, but the point estimator are just scattered around while the CIs are really big. So people will definitely ask about it if you have an answers to that. But going back to left wing as well, like the direction of estimate is still in line with the common understanding of the politics as well as the literature, so you have to think about it. So like my understanding of all of these in bullet point number 6 is like that populism simply hinders the growth of high-skilled migration regardless of the like right wing or left wing or something. So you could think about it that as well. And another question not in this line is that how do you connect with the core 2 values that you find that you started with in your introduction, say anti-elitism and anti-polarism? How do you connect these core values to your results, and how will you interpret your results through this kind of angle? Maybe you could think about it as well. And about mechanism and policy example, I think it is really good to see in your presentation that you have policy example, but maybe you could divide these policy examples by target group, by skill, and extent of the impact. Say about the language barrier or language test, low skill we're gonna have been like impacted a lot, while the high skill could like think that it is not that much hurdle. While the degree per se we're gonna be just like tight entry barrier for low skill ones. But high skilled are by definition, they will be eligible for migration. So about this mechanism part, you could divide by target group, by skill, and see what is going on. And admitting the limitation about the migrant's preference is really very good thing, I think, because reverse causality may arise from attractiveness of a country and arrival of populism. But I'm a bit confused about your explanation in your draft about you are focusing migrants or rather intended migrants. So you are having those who are already living in the foreign country and who are potential migrants. So if you are using already living in those who are living in a foreign country, the migrants, then they could be kind of selective sample, because if we think we can't think about their migration decision per se as a revealed preference. And if that is the case, the more fundamental factors could be more decisive, and that could be more not related to your populism context in the paper. Say long-term economic momentum of destination country could matter more, timing their factors and more, so they could track these selective sample. And those who are living in a foreign country already could have more bigger pronounced heterogeneity in terms of their language, of their origin and destination, their race and continent and origin destination combinations or something. So you could think about it in more various way, as well as other questions are handling. So yeah, I think these are the whole bunch of the comments that I have. I'm really sorry that I'm just dropping all of these right away, but I think because of this limited time, this could be the only efficient way. So yeah, I really enjoyed your presentation as well as reading your draft, like I said.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Juno. So now we can take questions from the audience as well. And if there's no questions right away, also, Etienne, you can give an answer to Juno.
Yeah, I mean, thanks a lot for all the all the comments. I will need some time to go through everything, but it's good to have like all those details. Yeah, I mean, so as you can see, that's also very much like a work in progress. Like there are a lot of things on heterogeneity, like especially from the last your last slides on heterogeneity of migrants for respondents, but where I mean I'm planning to do this. Also, we use more also the bilateral dimension. Since I have bilateral flows, maybe I can also try to restrict flows from certain origins and see how it's. I mean, if there are some differences. Yeah. Also. Yeah, for Poisson regression, yeah. So I think, yeah, that might be a part that is out of date in the draft, because yeah, it's definitely a Poisson regression that I did. Yeah, you had some points about the rebound. So basically, there's this negative effect after Populist arrived at power, and then it goes back to sort of like no difference with vicinity control. And I think so. My interpretation would be that since I'm looking at the growth rate of immigration, after some point, you know, like while I mean, if like the size of the inflow continues to decrease, at some point you arrive to like the decrease will be lower and lower in terms of percentage points, I think. But
So
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you are saying that your pattern of immigration flows are just going into another steady state with lower level, right? Is that what you're saying? The growth rate is just decreasing. So you are just changing. This country is changing into another state with lower level of flows. After this rise of the populist leaders, even after their term. Is that what you mean?
That's the only thing I can think of for now. But yeah, that's definitely a pattern I have to explain better in the paper.
Yeah, but you don't have to like answer all of these right now. Like I'm just saying that I really
like there are a lot of comments. I'm a bit overwhelmed by
I'm sorry, but like I said, I really enjoyed reading your paper, and like I said, we are working in the same avenue. So I really try to be more helpful to your project because I think it is really interesting.
It's definitely very helpful. And thanks a lot. It's just hard to pick one point to which answer right now. But I see there's a question in the chat, so I don't know.
Yes. So we have a question by Andres who asks, why are the standard errors not being clustered by country or region?
Even for the, I guess for the mechanisms part, yeah, just because I don't know, just didn't do it, but can definitely try that, yeah.
All right. So
I think I may have a question.
Yeah.
My main reaction when reading the draft was like, how can you take into account the fact that you may have a populist leader that is followed by a non-populist leader, but they, in the end, they may have the exact same political agenda in terms of immigration. Maybe they had different discourse, but they could implement the exact same policies, or one could implement the policy and the next one could not undo this policy. So how can you?
Yeah, that's for sure. That's one of the limitations of this binary classifications between populist and non-populist. One thing that they could do is use an additional measure of populism. So there was some papers by Dokier and Ricardo Turati and some co-authors about building a more continuous measure of populism. So basically, computing like the intensity of populism by a political party, and so that's something I could use. But then that would require totally also a totally different method, because you can't do event study, like you can't use event study method on this kind of thing.
But also what I mean is that in terms of heterogeneity, your effect may depend a lot on who comes next and how different the following leader is from the populist one. Or I mean, who comes next and who was before? I mean, in both ways, because the gap and the intensity of this populism will depend on what was the type of policy before, what is the type of policy afterwards, and they may not be very different. Maybe they are really different. So I mean, at least in terms of heterogeneity, I think it would be super interesting.
For after, yeah, it will have some difference. But for the pre-populist part, like, I mean, ideally, yeah, the synthetic control should capture those like this rise already in the pre-transition period.
Yeah, true.
I think. But yeah, for the post-treatment part, yeah, that could happen.